Hello, everybody. Facefoot here. I wanted to go ahead and bring you an update on our tier list specifically and the build guides as well. We recently had our first full team meeting since launch where we, sat down and discussed these things, went over the tier lists, moved things around. People have been going in, updating the build guides that we do have up. And just to point out that we are working on new build guides. There should be several coming here in the next week. And over the following weeks, we'll be releasing really as many as we can. So, let's jump into these tier lists. And real quick before we do that, just to show you, under our build guide filter, again, everything has been updated in the last, few days or so. We had that patch 1.0.2D, I believe it was, where there were actually quite a few changes. There are still some things out there like Edge Master's aspect being disabled. It's going to come back, but, they're fixing some of the bugs like the incredible whirlwind bugs, just absolutely breaking the game and things like that. So, some aspects are kind of coming and going still through bugs. I'm sure we're going to be getting, a lot of updates pretty regularly here in these early days. So, these things will be getting updated regularly, changed, and as we're making new builds, we'll be doing the same. But as far as the tier lists go, we have four different tier lists. We have a leveling tier list, we have a speed farming tier list, end game tier list, and the nightmare dungeon pushing tier list. So all four of these things essentially cover different aspects of the game. So let's just go through them here real quick and show you the changes we have made, just so you can better prepare as you're going through these parts of the game. So for the leveling tier list, really this is the one that's probably changed the least so far. We think that, as far as the leveling experience goes, a lot of the changes that have happened to the game probably more affect these builds later in the game. So things like, Twisting Blades Rogues has had some nerfs. It's still incredible for leveling up. Things like Chain Lightning Sorcerer, Firewall Sorcerer, they're just still doing fantastic. So as you can tell on these tier lists, we use these arrows up and down, and you can always also just go down to the change log and see, just kind of quickly what has changed as we're going through this. These should always be updated, whenever we're doing things. So bottom line of leveling, we've moved two of the ranged rogues up. Both of these are jumping up a tier, Penetrating Shot and Barrage Rogue. It's just really good. Ranged Rogue has a lot more to offer than maybe some people initially thought. As you can tell, Twisting Blades is still the king, but we have three different ranged rogue builds all the way up in A tier. So if you're playing on a rogue, whether you're going ranged or melee, you're probably going to be doing pretty good through the leveling experience. Other than that, we've pretty much left everything where it was. There's a lot of builds that really have a pretty easy time while leveling. As you get down to the B tier, C tier, it's not going to be as fast. It's not going to be quite as smooth. If you like these play styles, they're still going to get the job done. Coming all the way down, our poor friend Shred, kind of sits down in D tier with some of these other builds that we do not have guides for yet. But, again, we're going to be trying to fill in all these tier lists as quickly as possible. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be leveling up and you want to play Upheaval Barbarian or a Pure Summoner Necro, it's going to be a lot slower and a little bit more painful than if you were going to hop on, let's say, Bone Spear Necromancer or Hoda, for example. So this is the leveling tier list. Those are the two minor changes we've had so far. Again, you can always check the changelog to see what's changing. So moving on from leveling, it kind of takes us into like speed farming and end game. Both of these are designed, as you're just kind of farming through the game. Speed farming is going to be more open world content. You're riding around on your horse, killing things outside. It's going to be the very fast builds, the things that can just absolutely blast through the game. So let's go through speed farming here first, and then we'll touch on end game, which maybe is a little bit more, curated to all the content as you push your way to one. But so for speed farming here, really, again, not too many changes. We are moving this Werewolf Tornado Druid build up on a lot of these tier lists. The build really just delivers. You can fly through the game. Tornadoes just pumping out of you. It's really pretty hard to beat, honestly. So if you've been wanting to play Tornado Druid and haven't checked it out yet, definitely worth looking at. And as far as Sorcerer goes, if you haven't heard, the Sorcerer, it's kind of struggling when you get to the really high tiers. It's maybe not as powerful as some builds, but when it comes to speed farming, I mean, all three, I guess you'd call it play styles, lightning, fire, and ice. They dominate. I mean, you fly on a sorcerer, they all play really well. It's hard to say the sorcerer class is not incredibly well balanced, because I mean, you can pretty much just pick an element, especially if you go with one of these main skills. And it's not to say there's, not other sorcerer builds even up here. I mean, ball lightning is going to be good. Chain Lightning is actually super good for speed farm. Again, it's maybe falling off in the end game. I know some people are playing around with some kind of like infinite stun builds because people are realizing when you get to these really high nightmare dungeons, I mean, you pretty much can't take a hit. So people are starting to, work into these play styles where how can I make it so the monsters never attack or, it's going just full glass cannon because some people are starting to think, I mean, almost no matter how much defense you put on, you're going to get one shot at those super high tiers anyway, kind of like fighting Pinnacle Lilith. So, it's just getting into these more gimmicky, stunny builds like that will be great. But back to the speed farming idea, Sorcerer dominates speed farming. Rogue's got a ton of good builds. Druid's actually got a couple builds up here. So speed farming, pretty much on any build, you're going to have a good time, other than, some of these other ones down here. Again, we're going to be working on some new guides. We got Barrage, Flurry coming. I know North War is working on some Sorcerer stuff. We are going to be adding this Stormclaw Druid. We're working on that. Same with Trample Slide. So most of these higher tiers and these tier lists should be filled up with guides sooner than later. And again, we'll kind of work our way down. It's as far as playing a Bloodlance Necromancer, it's maybe not our highest priority, but if we can find something good, who knows? This might jump up in these tier lists as we start to play and test around more. So just keep that in mind too. These are going to be changing probably pretty regularly. So again, down in the changelog, at the end of the day, Druids are doing good. They're mostly moving up with these builds. We moved Trample Slide down a little bit just because, again, it's, I mean, the Werewolf's better, and this is really having a hard time truly competing with some of these incredibly fast and smooth playing builds as far as just open world farming goes. But again, mostly just moving a lot of things up some tiers. We're just starting to realize that really these builds all, if you get a good spec on them, can all speed farm pretty well. So speed farming really shouldn't be too big of a problem, not what you're playing, but if you're just going to be out there riding around in the open world, just playing the game, super casual, you're not going to be pushing the nightmare dungeons or this or that. I mean, pick one of these builds and you're going to have a good time all the time. So aside from speed farming, Endgame, again, this is more just the really well-rounded. You're going to be going from 50 to 100. It's going to be powerful. Pretty much anything you go do, it's going to do a good job. Again, it's just a very well-rounded Endgame build. Now, this does not necessarily mean, like I was just answering questions about this in Discord, like Whirlwind Barbarian versus Hoda. Hoda is going to be better when you're really pushing high tier nightmare dungeons and you need just a very powerful, tanky, good build. But when you're hit level 50, like you're not really ready for Hoda to be that amazing and smooth. You don't have all the gear, you don't have all the paragons. So like, this is why Whirlwind is still going to be really good for like 50 to 100 leveling, just crushing through the game. But the moment you're getting to those really high levels and you want to, see how high you can go, you're probably going to want to respec to Hoda. So that's kind of the difference here between the end game tier list or like the nightmare dungeon pushing tier list. Some builds are going to be way better at that progression through the end game than they are at actually pushing like the very highest pinnacle content. So let's go through the end game changes here first. Again, Werewolf Tornado going up. Like this build just crushes. I mean, it's like we have a video up on our YouTube of Teo running through a tier 50. A tier 50 is not a tier 80, it's not a tier 90, but for end game, again, just farming, going through the game, Tornado Druids, you're going to have a great time. So he has joined many of these other great builds up in the S tier. Again, Firewall Sork. In the beginning, we had it kind of a tier below some of these other sorcerers, but it's pretty much just coming up to match their level on most tier lists. Like the Firewall is really quite powerful. It's maybe a little bit, I don't know. I played Firewall myself, actually, like leveling up and going through. Like just some starting end game, but Firewall is just a little clunkier. You put down the firewalls, you kind of just let things die as you're running along, but it gets the job done. You can just keep moving. You're still using that Inferno, Shatter, Frost Nova combo. I mean, you just jump from pack to pack and blast them apart. So Firewall is doing pretty good. Rapid Fire and Barrage, we're finding that these are actually both, again, these ranged rogue builds are really pretty good. We got some ranged rogue builds coming as far as guides go, but really, in the beginning, the ranged rogues, there were a lot of people that were kind of talking down on them, not thinking they had much potential, but they were wrong. Ranged rogues are doing just fantastic. Shred's actually pretty okay for speed farming. It hasn't moved, but there it is. Like nice to see it out of the D tier for once. And then again, we have some necromancers just kind of going up in general during that patch. Again, 1.0.2D. They got some decent little buffs just kind of here and there. Especially there was a little minion buff. I mean, it's not like it took Necros from F tier to S tier, which, again, they do have some builds that are phenomenal, but these summoner builds, Blood Lance, Blood Surge, like Necros kind of just coming up in general. So not bad to see it. Again, down here, a little summary of pretty much everything I just said. You can check that if you want to look at it. But, endgame tier list, again, it's as far as what we have covered, most of the guides we actually have are going to be some of these higher tier builds. We're going to be filling it in, but most builds are doing pretty good. And again, this Stormclaw Druid that we're going to be writing up, you probably heard people talking about it, but it's looking like it's going to be pretty dang good. Like once this is fully put together and, actually kitted out, I wouldn't be surprised if this maybe starts to flirt with jumping up into S tier as well. So more guides coming on this endgame tier list, but just a few changes. Most things look like they're just kind of going up for that. So let's move into Nightmare Dungeon. This was the last one we did. This is where really you got some things kind of going up and down because at the end of the day, this is like the pinnacle best in slot. You're pushing that 80 plus Nightmare Dungeon, trying to get as high as you can. So as far as we know right now, we think Hoda's probably the best. If you're going to get in there, and it's not to say, 5 days from now, there's probably going to be some builds we're hearing about or playing that, it's like, dang, look at that thing go. But as for now, Hoda smashes. It's pretty tanky, huge hits, huge damage, really good. So that has jumped up 2 tiers up into S tier. It's essentially switched spots with Whirlwind. Whirlwind's just been nerf, 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 nerf. Still pretty good for the end game leveling. Really not that great for early leveling. And it's really not that great anymore for end game pushing because it just lost so much of its power. You get in there, you just dying. It's not in the best spot. So that's kind of what happened here. Hoda and Whirlwind have swapped spots essentially. Again, Whirlwind Tornado making a name for itself, constantly jumping up into S tier, high A tier across the board. Not going to have a bad time playing this. The rest of it stayed the same. If you've seen these tier lists before, or if you haven't, Sorcerer's got 2 great builds. Bone Spirit Necro was really good. Bone Spear, pretty good still. And Penetrating Shot Rogue, because of the power of ranged and how powerful this build is, debatable. It's like these top builds it's going to be a lot of back and forth here, I think, seeing who can really do what. And it's not to say some other build might come out of nowhere and fly up here. Like we're saying, Chain Lightning stunning like crazy, or who knows what gimmicks people will come up with. Ren Barb has moved up a tier, doing pretty good. Again, kind of like Hoda. It's just better than Whirlwind, probably. If you're really trying to push, you probably want to go for those 2 builds. Stormclaw's here. It's going to be having a guide hopefully pretty soon for that. Really, again, looking pretty solid. It's doing some really good damage in the kind of earlier Nightmare Dungeon pushing, maybe like in the 60s or so. And so, as we start to, push higher with this build, it's, I guess we'll see its real potential. Whirlwind's down again. Barrage, Rapid Fire again. Just kind of moving up. Rage Rogues in general, just moving up in general. About 1 tier for now. We'll see how they really perform as, little tweaks come here. I think, Penetrating Shot's obviously doing amazing, and the melee rogues kind of fall down as you get into this really high end content. Coming back here, Death Trap, Twisting Blades are our S tier, 50 to 100. But when you really start pushing, you're probably going to want to switch to ranged. It's like even obviously the king is up here, but even these other ranged rogues are probably going to do better than these pushes. So keep that in mind. Again, Necro just kind of jumping up in general. Still down in the C tier. You're not going to change the world on a pure summoner necromancer, at least right now. Maybe somebody will find something, but it's not looking like there's anything super magical there. But they have indeed moved. We actually moved Trample Slide down too. Again, this build is fast. It's got great AoE. It's looking like there's potential good PvP for the Trample Slide, but when it comes to really pushing so far, from what we've seen and played, and we've had multiple guys actually playing this build, it's I don't know. It's just it doesn't seem like it's going to really push that high in these Nightmare Dungeons. So really fun build, but maybe not the best for actually like real end game pushing. Then again, our poor friend Shred hanging out in D tier as always. It's a unique build. It's a play style. It's probably going to change. They like to balance and change these things. So as other builds are getting nerfs and coming back down to reality, Shred might see itself kind of hop up in some of these tier lists. But we don't really got to worry too much about Shred when our good friend Stormclaw is coming around. And obviously, Druid's not in a bad spot. We got Tornado up here. You got Pulverize. Again, we got the Stormclaw coming. So a lot of potential there on Druid. Again, this changelog down below will show you all the changes. But at the end of the day, some minor tweaks here and there. We expect there to be, a good amount of changes pretty much every few days, every week. we'll always be updating these tier lists pretty much at least weekly. We have weekly meetings. We like to do these right, with everybody in the meeting talking about it, discussing it, arguing about it. It's like not just one person comes here and is like, "Oh, I want to move this one up, this one down." It's like we really try to put a lot of thought into this. Obviously, the game is early. I mean, we don't think we're going to get everything right every time. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that everything's not right. Every build isn't even on here. For example, like you can see in the changelog, like Thorns Barbarian. Just a quick tidbit from me. I can't speak for everybody. But like Thorns Barbarian has just changed a lot over like different testing phases and the alphas and this and that. And it's just really hard to put that on a tier list like this without fully kitting it out and really getting in there and playing it. So we didn't want to just throw it on here because, to be frank, nobody on our team has really pushed a Thorns Barbarian yet. So like we know it's there. It's hard to confidently throw it on a tier list when you really haven't tested it that much. You don't want to just go watch a clip on Twitch or a video on YouTube and slap it on your tier list and act like you're actually putting it somewhere. It kind of compromises the rest of the list, right? So, other builds that we have played and seen, like Stormclaw, we don't have a guide for it yet, but like we know its power. So there will be other builds coming. There will be a lot of changes in the near future. We'll try to keep everybody updated with news posts and things like that, things like this video. But at the end of the day, check the last updated, check the change log. If it says it was updated and the change log's not down here, go on to Discord and yell at us. We'll go back in and type it in. But just wanted to give everybody a quick update on these tier lists. I guess hopefully it ended up kind of rambling on here about them, but just wanted to give you guys a, little update since we did have a pretty good patch, and this is the first time where we've really got the whole team together to look at this and try to reanalyze it. We'll probably do the same next Saturday, and so even next Sunday, I guess I'll maybe put out another video if there are any updates and just try to keep you guys informed. But anyway, thanks for stopping in. Go check out the site if you want to browse through these yourself. Again, we have the updated build guides. We also, as another thing to just touch on here real quick, we have these side quests and dungeon features up here. We've been trying to fill these in as quickly as possible. There's still like Hallows or this final zone or whatever. We still got quite a bit coming for there, but we've been filling in a lot of this stuff. Like you'll find some dry steeps. We've been working on the Kyrgyzstan dungeons, side quests for dry steps are all up. So, if you're looking for more content, we really in the last, 24 hours, we probably posted like 50 more articles up here as far as these two sections go. So next couple weeks, we plan on having all of this full. Again, we plan on filling in pretty much every build guide you can find on the tier list from like, A tier up especially. We plan on having guides for like, 95% of this stuff here in the next, end of the month, certainly before season 1. So check back. Constant updates are coming. Hope you guys are having fun out there blasting D4, and we'll see you out there.